Hi, everybody. Roger Lajoie with my great friends Chris DePiro, Jim Rooney for our Teammates podcast. Glad you're along with us. We talk about our top teammates principles. There's 10 of them. Number 3, choose optimism. It's all in how you look at it. Chris, it's a choice. And one of the things we found with a lot of people, especially younger people, thinking people are inherently optimistic or people are just negative Nancy's and that's the way they are. You can change, you can develop it. And I think optimism first is misunderstood. And secondly, I think people do not understand how much control they have over the way they think.
Yeah, it's such a big thing for me. It's you talk about the choice and looking at a situation. We can look at look out the window and kind of see two different things. If we're looking at the same window from the same vantage point, you may see one thing, I may see another. I think that's the way people look at their realities as well. But I'm a big believer, as you two are. I know that in terms of the idea of choosing optimism, and I think that's rooted in having positive expectations for what you want. And so I look at that based on setting a goal, setting what intentions of what you want to do, setting intentions of how you want to show up. And it takes work to continue to choose that, because some days you're going to be challenged. But I just think it's the ability to seek to choose that optimism, or seek to choose to be positive, is basically affirming what you want in the future is a good thing. And I think that's where people kind of get messed up, because they don't want to put the work in to be able to do that. They think it has to happen naturally. And I think that goes back to your point, choice. And when we have to choose something, it requires some work.
We cannot choose our circumstances far too often, Jim. We all know that. Sometimes health, sometimes weather, sometimes anything we can't choose. So much of life is out of our control. But how we react to anything in our life is always in our control. And that's a hard message for a lot of people to understand, because they don't believe that. They say, well, how can you possibly, go change and choose your attitude? Alfred Adler, a philosopher, was put it very well. He talked about it and said, end of the day is, instead of the first thought when something happens is, oh, this is terrible, or this is good, instead of doing that, how about the first thought being, it is what it is, what do we do now? And I always kept that in the back of my mind, because I think that's a great way to approach anything that happens in life. So you get a bad health diagnosis. The first thing, this is terrible. Remove the opinion for a second. Let the first thought be, okay, what do we do now? And then you gravitate towards optimism. Because people think, guys, optimism is thinking everything is good. It's not thinking everything is good. It's looking for the good in everything. That's just a healthy way to live, Jim, as a choice.
Absolutely, and that's what we have. We have the ability to choose to react, and we can react like, "Oh my God," or "Hey, what's the next opportunity here?" It's so clear that you can see the sky falling, or you can see the sunshine. It comes back to how we perceive. You use the example of the glass half full, the glass half empty. Well, let's face it, the glass half full is far more nourishing, far more invigorating, far more hopeful than the glass half empty. Because there's nothing if it's empty. But if there's something, as you say, you always say, look for the good. And even in bad times, there's good. I always say to myself or to others, don't let bad people affect you. There's still good in them, and try to find it and perhaps reveal it to them. Tell them about that good in their perception of bad.
Also hear this all the time, and clients come up with this all the time. Optimism is not realistic. We talked about this on a previous podcast. It is not realistic. Look at the world. Come on. Look online on your iPad. Pick up a newspaper. Take a look at the news. How could anybody be optimistic during this time? It is not based in reality. My thing is, reality, first of all, as we talked about previously, is how you perceive it. Mm-hmm. But you can always put the most optimistic thing on it. It's not thinking everything is good. It's looking for the good in the worst of circumstances. And Chris, no matter how people say, well, it's more balanced. You should be, I'd rather be a realist than an optimist. Or it's more pragmatic to be a pessimist. This has been proven over and over and over again. Martin Seligman writes about it in his great books all the time, is optimists live longer, they're healthier. I don't have to hear anything else in terms of how I should live and how I do my life. They live longer and they're healthier. That's a fact. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions. No one's entitled to their own facts. It's a fact, and you can choose to just gravitate toward, make that your default way of thinking.
Well, and ultimately, people will seek out the news or the information to satisfy their own narrative of what they perceive to be their reality. And I think the idea is that if you chose not to listen to the news and chose not to pay attention to what's out there and the negativity, so to speak, you know, I'm going to guarantee you probably end up being a lot more positive about how you view your circumstances because you're not letting the outside in fact or influence the inside. And going back to the glass half full, half empty, Howie Mandel always says, regardless, you can always go back to the sink and the tap to fill the glass up. And it's just having a different perception of what to do with the glass. And I think that's where people get caught. They get caught in either or circumstances and don't realize that they have, it could be both and, or it could be a different solution. And to your point, it's now what? And I'm always reminded of improv, like the improv comedy. And when they're teaching people how to do improv, and they say anybody can do improv. It's not just comedians. The number one rule in improv is if somebody says something, your response in your head isn't to react or to respond to it. It's to say, okay, and now what? What can I do to build on this? What can I do to move this forward? How do I carry this conversation? Which in effect is a way to create some positivity because you're moving things forward and looking at things positively because you're now contributing to the conversation. And that's why I like improv.
Yeah, that's a great a good analogy there. And I do like, again, to go back to Adler, what now? So, Jim, one night I'm driving back on the highway, and I was on a phone call with a friend of mine and I felt the car starting to slip. And I said, so I was on speakerphone, and I said, I got to call you back because these roads are really bad. He goes, okay, drive safe. So I drive, and it was a really scary road, and I managed to pull over at the side, and I stopped the car, and then oh my goodness, I hit it, and he goes, hey, you okay? Yeah, but man, oh man, that road was ridiculous. The slip. Goes, yeah, but you okay? Yeah, I'm good. But man, you should have seen it, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, yeah, but you're okay. You're good now. And I go, well, yeah, okay. So anyway, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And you stop and you realize it's like, but again, we've talked about this issue before. It's like the first thought, if it isn't, what do I do now? Is like, oh my God, I'm losing control of the car. This is awful. I'm sweating. What's going to happen is, okay, what now? What do I do now? All right, well, I better try to get to the right-hand lane. I don't want to go into the curb. Like you start reacting, you get bad news. What do I do now, as opposed to the judgment of good or bad? And we are so in tune, Jim, to labeling everything as either good or bad. And I say this over and over again, and I believe it's a core belief of mine in addition to the beliefs and principles we have. Events are just events. Whether they're good or bad or not is an opinion. It is strictly an opinion. And even the worst things. I got a bad medical diagnosis. I've had people who've had cancer who've told me it's the best thing that happened to them, and I said, oh, come on. I said, believe me, trust me, brother, it changed my life. It is. But at first you think, how could that possibly be a good thing? How you interpret it. You look for the good. Nobody wants to have a cancer diagnosis, for heaven's sakes. But if you take the good out of it, as opposed to, oh my goodness, same thing. Do you have a 50% survival rate or a 50% death rate? It's the same number. It's the way you phrase it. Choosing optimism, Jim. You can choose that. Sometimes it's hard, but you can.
And we can choose that every day. That's the beauty. Growing up in an Irish family, we use this phrase. I'll always remember my mom and dad saying, look for the silver lining. There's always that silver lining you're going to find. And what I interpreted that is, growing up then is, and being in school myself, is I was rooted in me early, expect the best. No matter what you expect the best. Okay? We used to challenge our athletes at time, first be the best, then you will be first. And and it's just so real that there is always, you talked about the mental health piece, the healthy. The Greeks taught us thousands of years ago that the psyche soma part of it, our thoughts clearly affect what's happening within us. If we think it's we're going to have a disaster, well, probably wish ourselves into one. If we aren't, then we can be part of that healing process and get the body, the mind back to where it naturally is.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned quotes. Muhammad Ali, said had so many great quotes, but one of them, Dips, was that I was the greatest. I said I was the greatest before I was. In other words, like that was his big line. I am the greatest. I am the greatest. But he said I am the greatest. He still hadn't proven he was the greatest, but he believed it first in optimism. And I think one of the things that stops people maybe from totally embracing the optimistic thing, and we talked about this, it's the same kind of thing. If you are too grateful, you will not be ambitious. But if you are too optimistic, you'll have rose-colored glasses on, and you'll miss opportunities, and you have to be more of a realist. Again, I go back into define reality, number one, but it's not saying, so it's not, an optimist doesn't go around saying everything's going to be great. I got a cancer diagnosis, doctor says, here's a cancer diagnosis, I go, well, everything's going to be great. No, it's like, all right, where's the good in this? What are the treatment things? I'm going to focus on the things I can do and control. I'm going to be as optimistic as possible. That's not ignoring reality. That's not ignoring negativity. That is based on realism. It's just a healthy way to live. And that's how we got to, and in this negative world with all the news you talked about, we got to find a way to do that. That's a key to happiness, I think.
Well, the term I like to refer to is having positive expectations. And you mentioned Kobe Bryant in a previous podcast, and Kobe Bryant was adamant always about having positive expectations. He, even amidst failure. So his rookie season in the NBA, coming right out of high school as an 18-year-old kid, he got drafted by the Charlotte Hornets, got traded to the Lakers, and he was star coming out of high school when it was kind of not, you had to be really good to come out of high school back then. And people thought he would be that he was gonna fail, and that he didn't have a really great rookie year. And in his moment, he just said he didn't pay attention to that because he had positive expectations of what he wanted to accomplish. Now, some could look at that and say, okay, well, that's just being foolish. The word foolish comes up. And he just said, no, because I trusted myself. And it has nothing to do with talent, because clearly he's talented. And people can take the lesson out of this as being able to say, trust yourself in the process of choosing to look at having positive expectations. So one makes a mistake, or one has a bad game or a bad business deal go wrong, or whatever happens, it's not about looking at that in a positive light. It's having positive expectation for what comes next. And I think that's the biggest piece. Some people get caught up in the negative happens, the failure happens, the mistakes happen, and they personalize it. And it goes back to what you said before. An event is just an event. It's our definition of the event that causes us to be optimistic or pessimistic. So I prefer to use the word positive expectations, because the events are going to happen every day of our lives. But how we choose to move forward out of that event, I think, is the key.
That's a great point. Martin Seligman, I referred to him earlier as well, wrote a book called Learned Optimism, Jim, where he talks about, obviously, the title is self-explanatory. You can learn to be optimistic. And they did surveys of U.S. presidential candidates and athletes. We'll appreciate the athlete one just as much as the U.S. presidential thing. And they tried to determine, what significance people's thoughts and how optimistic they were led to the results. And they did this over a period of a couple of years. And so they analyzed post-game comments from coaches and players for their level of optimism, and U.S. politicians running for president, how they reached out to the public. Did they say, times are tough and you really need me, or times are going to be better, that kind of optimistic spiel. Election after election after election, the most optimistic candidate won. And in sports, the more optimistic athlete managers always won. And it wasn't denying. They could be they could have lost 10-0. And then, so what are your comments on the game? We just didn't have it tonight, but we'll get them tomorrow. It was just geared towards the better side, the more optimistic side. Over and over again, I referred to earlier, optimists live longer and are healthier. You can stop talking to me about choosing optimism. If that's the case, I'm choosing optimism. Why would any person of any kind of like smarts at all not choose to live better and live healthier? It's not ignoring a 10-0 loss. It's first of all seeing it as temporary, and the next one will be better. And it's trained. You can, and that's where the title comes: learned optimism, just by forcing yourself at first, if you have to look for the good. That's why my tagline.
It's and it's so critical. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And what we believe within our own realm and our own sphere of life drives the bus, gives us the energy. The optimist always says, we'll, if we analyze, we reflect on where we missed the mark or didn't deliver our best or whatever. But the optimist says, that's why we're playing tomorrow. You've had a great life in baseball, and thank God they play 162, because you can't focus on 5 or 6. It's the big picture that fuels you to say, hey, we're gonna be better today. We're gonna hit, we're gonna run, we're gonna pitch, we're gonna have played great defense. And that's the fuel that ignites us. And once we ignite the passion, then I think we're pretty grateful for, hey, we're here. Let's do it.
Yeah, the optimistic viewpoint is mandatory, I think, for a lot of walks of life and even regular walks of life. So now, what I get dips, and we've heard from clients and people say all the time, is again with optimism, is that it's in itself. Some people think that's enough. Now, I'm not walking back what we've just talked about, but it isn't enough. And you've seen this as with players. There, people are very optimistic. They come in, yes, we're going to win. We're going to win 10. We're going to win tomorrow. And they repeat mantras and they do everything else, and they don't do the work. So optimism, things are going to be great, comes along with, again, it's not thinking everything is going to be good. It's staying positive. Yes, so I really want to win. I'm going to work out. I'm going to listen to coach. I'm going to practice hard. We're going to do everything they can. It's got to be backed up with action. And I think sometimes that's where optimism gets a bad frame of mind, because somebody says, okay, you know what? I'm just going to be optimistic that this is going to happen. So one time I'm on a private plane, and on planes you have to de-ice the plane when the temperature hits a certain degree. And that's a firm rule to keep people safe in the air. Pilot comes back and talks, I'm not going to say who it was, but talks to the person who's the owner of the plane and goes, listen, we're at this certain thing and blah, blah, blah. And the guy makes a bit of a joke and just says, you don't have to de-ice. I'm an optimist. I think we're going to get there. And to which the pilot said, I'm an optimist too, but sir, we are de-icing the plane right now. See the semantics. It's a funny story, but it really does illustrate. Some people think, just go around saying, I think I can, I think I can. In every way. What was that phrase? I'm getting better and better. You can repeat those mantras, and yeah, for some people it makes it better, but you've got to walk that talk as well. You have to live as an optimist. Believing things are going to be better is backed up by working hard too.
Well, I'll go back to the Kobe Bryant story in terms of that and just kind of dovetail, because he talked about that rookie year. He thought, okay, yeah, he didn't pay attention to all the naysayers, but he also realized I got to do some work. So he said, how can I think of again the positive expectations? So he realized in high school he played 35 games. In the NBA his rookie year, they went to the playoffs. They played 110. They got eliminated by Utah, I think, in the conference final. And he just realized his legs weren't strong enough. So in his mind was, okay, I'm on the path of my growth as an athlete. I have to now strengthen my legs. The positive expectation for him was he had the trust, the faith, the belief in himself, as Jim said too, that then ignites a passion to be able to move forward. That's choosing optimism. And it's, again, it's put the talent aside and put the example of Kobe Bryant aside. It's just the ability to say, okay, what can I do in this moment to move forward, to choose to be positive in terms of expecting what comes next. And to me, that's such a big thing. And I think there's two terms that are kind of always inextricably intertwined. It's faith and fear. And it's being able to understand, like, faith and fear we can't see, touch, or smell. But the idea is that they exist out there. And optimism is about having faith in yourself and what is possible versus having fear in what is not possible and having that kind of pessimistic attitude. And I'll leave you with this. For me, it's like they're inversely related in terms of being pessimistic and optimistic. Being pessimistic is easy. Is easy. Anybody can sit back and complain and be negative and not do anything. Being optimistic is hard because you have to do the work. To your point, to Kobe's point, I had to strengthen my legs to be better. So it's hard. So people have to understand it's not just about a mantra. You have to do the work or walk the walk.
That's excellent and very well said. And Jim, so let's choose pessimism. Like right off the bat, you're behind just by not electing, and it's a choice again, electing not to choose an optimistic attitude. You are choosing then, well, you know what? This is going to be tough, and they've won 12 in a row, and it's going to be really hard to beat these guys, and it's going to be direct. One client, I remember once saying, I said, so you're down today? Yeah, I'm down. Why? I got a real challenge tomorrow. I said, you're going to be optimistic and look up to it. And she said, oh my goodness, I just know it's going to be a long day, and I'm going to be so tired by 7 o'clock. And I said, how do you know how you're going to feel at 7 o'clock tomorrow? First of all, and second of all, you're already, here's the first step to when you say, I'm really tired. How do I, eat better, sleep better. Stop talking about how tired you are. Joe Madden, manager of Tampa Bay Rays, once I was in an interview with him, and I asked him, I said, how does your team over the years, Joe, compete against the American League East, the Yankees and the Red Sox? They're so tough, eh? And the division is the payrolls, and it must be so difficult. In Toronto, it's so difficult, and blah blah blah. And he said, yes, there is no question about that. He said, but here's the first thing we do: we stop talking about it. We stop talking about the fact that the Yankees' payroll is 250 million and our payroll is 30 million. That's not solving anything. And it just creates negativity and creates pessimism and a negative expectation. We will never be able to compete with these guys. He looks at it, yeah, but our guys are younger, they're hungrier. We spent a lot of money in scouting, and we've seen what Tampa Bay has done over the years and able to compete. It starts with being optimistic, regardless of your circumstances, Jim.
And that kind of maddened optimism is portrayed in a strategy. I had to employ it once, working with a group that when a new idea was put out there, often when I discovered working with this particular group that it's not going to work, it's going to be too costly, we've never done it before, every excuse. And so I had to develop a strategy. So the strategy I developed to nurture a thought of, like, don't talk about it. First 3 people speak have to speak positively about it, just to see if it's got any legs to grow, to see if it can be nurtured into something, to see if it resonates with people, to say, hey, maybe. And until you do something strategically, and you touched way earlier about it, I find it ironic in today's news, we give 29 minutes of ugh, and we close it off with, here's a good news.
Yeah, right.
Here's something
So it's just a little puppy.
It's going to inspire you.
Yeah.
Really? So that 29 minutes of ugh, I'm going to get just a little bit at the end of, wow, this is great. Why don't we do 29 minutes of this is really good? Oh, and by the way, that crap's happening too.
Mm-hmm. Well, pessimism maybe has its place, guys. When you look at it, it does keep you honest. You do need that counter thing.
Yeah.
You just can't, everything's going to work out. No, you come in, you state your case, but if you do it in an optimistic way and back it up with action dips, that's the key, and you see it. Players understand this is going to be a very difficult task tonight. You need that counter. Sometimes that's what the coach does. Yep. You're the guy who does that. Make the players positive. You be the negative guy, and that'll bring out the positive in your players.
Yeah, you know what? Leadership is, obviously, in every walk of life, and we talk about that, the essence of leadership and being able to kind of create an environment where people can choose to look at, making positive strides. I'm often reminded that one of my favorite movie characters of all time is Ed Harris plays the character in Apollo 11 of the flight director. And then obviously, you have this spacecraft that goes off and they're going to land on the moon, but then something goes awry. The famous Houston, we have a problem, kind of comes into play. They need to get the spacecraft safely back to Earth. Tom Hanks plays the flight guy in the spacecraft. But Ed Harris is leading this group of people in Houston that has to get this spacecraft back here, safely. And what's interesting about that, everybody was kind of talking about being realistic, looking at all the facts. I'm not sure we can get this done, and it's kind of negativity, but they're trying to in terms of being realistic. And he just stopped everybody at one point in the movie, and I love the line because he said, "Gentlemen, failure is not an option." And to me, that's, I think, the very essence of what I think leadership is being able to cast a vision, cast an idea of what is possible. And I think if people can do that on an individual basis and look at, say, hey, you know what? I'm going to keep the choose moving forward. Whatever happens is all information. It's feedback for me to move forward. Whether I failed, I had success, or whatever it is, it's feedback. That's all it is. And to me, that's important in terms of looking at things from a brighter side. It's not about hey, everything's sunshine and rainbows, but it's choosing to look for the good, look for the possibilities.
Look for the good. Choose optimism. It'll make you live longer and healthier, and that's the best reason of all. We thank you for choosing to listen to Teammates. Visit us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, our YouTube channel, and you can drop us an email anytime at teammates@rogers.com. Thank you for watching. We appreciate it.